Hi, and thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you to talk about pre-choice, a tool that we are not born with. What were you thinking? How many times have we heard either our parents say that, a teacher say that, or we've thought it to ourselves? What were we thinking? Well, guess what? There's a good chance that you really weren't. Our brains develop. We're born with them, we know that, but they really do develop in a totally different time frame than what we really think. So, as we're born, we have this nice little tiny set of synapses called the amygdala. About almond shaped, lives in the back of our brain, and I'll tell you something, it's what causes us to deal with our choices by emotion. The amygdala really does control our process of emotion. It's not until we start into our mid-teen years and into going up to 25 that the one part of our brain that processes rationality, the prefrontal cortex, comes into play. It's a slow developer, just like many of us. And it takes until the age of 25 before we begin to realize that there is a rational part that needs to take place when we make choices. So what does that all have to do with pre-choice? Well, pre-choice is a learned method of thinking that takes place prior to a choice having to be made. What does that mean? That means we need to have this ability to think out things that we could be getting into prior to us ever having to make a choice and go, what would I do if and when? This is something that I have always worked on teaching my children. I've worked with children, worked with my daughter's friends and everything up to including their adult lives to teach them how to make good pre-choices. Talk to them about what happens if, and again, why would you do that? It's all part of the thing that we as parents, we as partners, we as significant others, and people of influence need to do to teach our kids how to make good pre-choices. So what does poor choices mean if they don't make a good pre-choice? Well, you can see that there are a few areas that impact almost every life. And I'm going to talk about the three most important or top ones that we know of that kids do get involved with. And I say kids, I'm 56 years old, that's 25 and under. So sorry about that, but that is just one of the ways, an over 50 brain tends to think. So the first one is crime and age. So what happens with crime and age, Ulmer and Steph Meyer for Sage Productions tells us, is that age and crime tend to go together. The peak adolescence ages is when most of the crimes, except for gambling, tend to take place. The crime rate fluctuates with the population of 15 to 24-year-olds. With the more 15 to 24-year-olds we have, honestly, the crime rates increase. And age tends to be the strongest factor in a lot of these across socioeconomic groups. And it's invariant. So what does invariant really mean? It means it doesn't vary between teens of color, young people of color. It doesn't vary between your social groups, your economic levels. It tends to remain the same. And when that happens, it's a biological issue. And we know that with all of the research that's been going on. So in Age and Crime Relationship that was published for Sage Publications, they really go into the details of how this biological issue, really tends to cause crime to escalate in these age groups. So the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, their website published Parents Are the Key. And it talks about how teens to the early 25-year-old age demographic, how they get involved in fatalities and accidents regarding the motor vehicles that they're driving, and a lot of times the poor choices that they're making. So they let us know that 2,500 teen to young 25s were killed in 2016. 300,000 were injured in motor vehicle related accidents. So what they're telling in this is that the population of teenagers and young 20s was 6.5% of our entire population. But they caused over $3 billion in motor vehicle related insurance claims. They noted what the causes were, and there are some really major ones. Poor judgment, peer pressure, the use of, or not use, of seatbelts, distracted driving, and reckless driving. All of which these people tended to make very poor choices. They didn't think about previously what they could be or should be doing before getting behind the wheels of that motor vehicle. So we know that lectures are ineffective, and what we really need to do when we're training our kids to be behind the wheel of a vehicle is to train them how to make good pre-choices. The other big issue that's out there for young people nowadays is unplanned pregnancy. Okay, so here's where pre-choice sounds like pro-choice, and I'm not getting into that part of a speech, but I wanted to bring this up because it does affect our youth. So in October of 2011, Advocates for Youth were eBridge's cites in unintended pregnancies among young people in the U.S. that the U.S. teen birth, pregnancy, and abortion numbers have decreased. But they're still higher than most of the industrialized nations of the world. That says a lot for a country that really has the most up-to-date information about how to prevent teen or young person pregnancy. So 15 to 19-year-old women account for the majority of unplanned pregnancies. A third of those are also women in their 20s. So this is a time where you would think that we would have some knowledge about basic biology to help stop unplanned pregnancies. So we have the knowledge, but what are we doing with it? We are making poor choices, most often due to the amygdala and that emotional response to a situation that we're in. Trust me, it's really hard to be in a situation where you have to make a choice to say yes or no to having sex. So what you end up having is somebody who makes an emotional decision, he loves me, versus the what's going to happen if I have sex with this person right now, unprotected, and what am I going to do if I have an unplanned pregnancy? Again, that's why we need to teach pre-choice. So just another stat is that for all races, all education levels, and across all income levels, those under 25 are at the highest risk for the unplanned pregnancies. So again, poor choices in the moment. Our amygdala jumps in and says, woohoo, this is great. But our prefrontal cortex isn't developed enough to say, hold on, wait, you need to think about what you're doing. So again, what could pre-choice training have done? So as you can see in that slide, these three big major issues that we have for our young people, it's really life-crushing. So here's what we do, and how does pre-choice training even begin? So parents, significant others, teachers, people in influential roles for our young people need to get involved. You can't just assume that the age of a person equals smarts, okay? Because it doesn't happen. We've got that biology back behind us. The amygdala, it's taking care of all of our emotions. The prefrontal cortex, it's trying to grow. And these kids are trying to figure out how to make good choices. So how do we do that? We have to teach, not preach. It's okay to turn around and continually go, why did you do that? What made you think that was a good idea? Trust me, you're not going to get the answers to these types of questions from a toddler, from, a child, or even from a teenager. You're going to get that blank look because they don't know. So what we have to do is we have to take that type of, we really have to take it onto ourselves and really say, what do we need to do? So first things off, start young. Don't ask your toddler why they thought doing something was good, why they thought smacking another toddler with the toy, wooden hammer was a good idea. They have no idea. At that moment, it felt good to them. So what do? We sit down and train them. This is not what we use toys for. This is not how we treat our friends. What would you do, if that happened to you? And you continue at their level because it really needs to be ingrained when they're little. Trust me, asking a teenage young man why he smacked some kid in the hallway when he's never been trained that that's not a good thing is never going to get you anywhere. They haven't been trained from that young age. They're not going to get that understanding at 16. So keep the lessons coming is our next step. So now we've got a child, elementary school, middle school, who is learning all these different things, coming into different social environments and situations. So if we've started young, they're a little better to be able to cope with the next thing. They can sit there and think, what were my pre-choice options? Because you've talked to them about it. You've talked to them about peer pressure. You've talked to them about cheating. You've talked to them about a number of items. So then they're going to graduate up into that teenager, young adult level. Here's where it comes hard. You got to have those tough discussions. You really have to talk to them about pre-choice and what that really means. So that when they get into the situation where all of their buddies are in the car egging them on to speed or to catch up or to drag race, they turn around and go, no, the choice is I can either do this, or if I'm in this situation, I tell my buddies, look this is a choice I have to make. I don't choose to get arrested. I don't choose to get a ticket. I don't choose to lose my license. It's the same way when that young woman is in that situation where, she's in a vehicle with a young man. He's telling them he's dying for it. She turns around and says, yeah, pass on. Instead of going, oh my gosh, this boy really loves me. Let's have unprotected sex and we'll deal with an unplanned pregnancy because why? He's in love with me. He's going to take care of me. We all know that doesn't often happen. So what do? We have to teach our girls. We have to teach our boys about how to make good pre-choices. And it takes the tough discussions to do that. So does this make all the issues go away? No. You can see in the slide how pre-choice training changes things. These issues don't go away. The proportion changes. So life expands for our young people. The ability for these issues to encroach on their lives gets smaller and smaller and smaller because they have the tool that we have taught them, the tool of pre-choice. So will they get involved with crime? Yeah, they can. Will they get involved with an unplanned pregnancy? It's an option. What about that automobile, which we all know that they want right when they can drive? Yeah, it's still there. It doesn't go away. But we've equipped them to better handle it so that life a good life, a starred life, expands exponentially, and these issues decrease. So what does that bring us to? That really brings us to the ability to influence and to have a generation of thinkers rather than non-thinkers. So, pre-choice. Was it what you thought it was? Most people, when they hear pre-choice, think pro-choice, or they think about, pro-life. And yeah, it is. It is being pro-choice, and it is being pro-life. But not in the way everybody thinks of those two issues. This is an all-encompassing issue. We're giving our kids the choice of making good pre-choices. So who can you influence? Anyone can start the pre-choice conversation. Can you touch lives? Sure you can. Whose lives can you touch? You can touch your children's lives, your friends' lives, your colleagues. You can touch your world. So, in honesty, coming back to what were you thinking? What are you thinking now? The pre-choice is yours.